Amen. Let's take our Bibles. This morning we're going to be in Ephesians chapter 6. Let's take our Bibles. Let's open to Ephesians 6. It is such a joy to be back with you this morning. I love looking out on you and just seeing faces, and it's so fun to look out because I see the people that I love, and I get to preach to the people I love, and I want to say that to you often. I love you. And it's a joy to bring God's word to the sheep and to the people that I love. Last weekend, I was away. I was in Tustin, California. I promise I was working, all right? But I was in Tustin, California, and I did a wedding for a former student of mine, and I also preached at Kindred Community Church. Great trip, but let me just confess something to you. It was a stressful trip. And it was mostly stressful because I brought my entire family of 6. I brought all of us on an airplane together to go to California. And on that first flight, my Lydia cried louder than I thought any baby could ever cry. It was so loud, I felt like crying. It was so loud, the stewardess came to me and said, "Is there anything you can do to shut that baby up?" I'm just kidding. That didn't happen. I just wanted to see your reaction. But the stewardess did come down the aisle, and I think they were thinking it because they leaned in and said, "Is there anything we can do to help?" And I said, "No, this one's just got to ride it. We just got to ride this out. We just got to get there." And it was very, very difficult. But, I was reminded in that moment that fatherhood, being a parent and fatherhood is really one of the more difficult things of life. But it's one of the most glorious things of life. It really is. Though it's challenging, though being a parent is at times challenging, moms and dads, it's a challenging thing, but it's a glorious thing. Now, I remember back to when I was a kid, and I think about how I behaved, and I was a bad kid. I would literally, my mom and dad would come to me and say, "Now, if you disobey, if you choose to do this, you're going to get a spanking." And I would literally negotiate the situation. Well, tell me, how many spankings are we talking about here? Like, is it going to be a hard one, or is it going to be a soft one? I need more information before I choose to disobey or not disobey. And that was my normal pattern, and now my kids are sort of doing the same thing. So I guess it's returned on me. But really, the struggle that is a universal struggle is for parents and kids how to navigate being a godly family. That's really hard. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate being a godly family? And really, we've got to come back to God's Word, not society, but we've got to come back to God's Word for our instructions on how to navigate those relationships. And it's over in Ephesians 6 that we see one of the household codes of the Bible. Today, I want to talk about how to make your Father's Day on Father's Day. I want to talk about how to make your Father's Day, God. I want to make God happy. I want to make your father happy on Father's Day. I want to talk about that. And this is a passage for fathers, for sons, for daughters, for children. It's a passage for the whole family on how to really be a godly family. And if you'll take your Bible, we're going to read it together. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Let's stand together in honor of God's Word as we do every week. Ephesians 6, starting in verse 1, says this: "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Now, before you sit down here, this is not a passage on how to be a better parent. This is not a passage on how to be a better kid. That's not what this is. That's not what we're dealing with this morning. Let me put another text up on the screen, and we'll just meditate on this together. Ephesians 4, verse 17 is really the heart of this passage, and it's really a transition point in the book of Ephesians. The last 3 chapters of Ephesians, really in the first 3 chapters, we're seeing the theology of the Christian life, the theology of the church. But in the last 3 chapters, we're seeing the working out of that theology, the working out of the gospel. And Paul will show us, he will tell us that you're no longer to walk as Gentiles do. Because you are in Christ, because you are born again, there's a new manner of your activity. Because you have a new identity, you have a new activity. And it goes to bear on how you work, It goes to bear on your marriages, chapter 5. It goes to work on your relationship, chapter 4. It goes to work on your family, chapter 6. The gospel is to work itself out. The grace of God is to work itself out in every aspect of your life. And so this morning, what I want us to see is that we're to put off the grave clothes and we're to put on the grace clothes. All right? That's what Paul's trying to say here in Ephesians. Put off the old life. Put off the grave clothes of your old life and put on the grace clothes of your new identity. This is who you are. And today we're to be transformed and let our transformation testify to the power of the gospel in our families. So today I want to show you 3 ways that grace empowers us to make our Father's Day. We're going to talk about our identity a lot. But we're going to see how God's grace goes to work on our relationships, and it empowers us to make our Father's Day on Father's Day. God bless you. You may be seated. 3 very simple points. Stay with me. The first point on Father's Day, let's adopt biblical convictions. That's number 1. The first thing that all of us across this room have to do is we have to adopt some biblical convictions. A lot of times our convictions are not biblically accurate. Our thinking, our practice, our way of life does not match the Bible's way of life. And the first thing we see here, conviction number 1, is that children are valuable. We need to have that mentality. We see that right in verse 1. That's the first word. Let's go there. Verse 1, it shows the value of children as a conviction. He addresses the children. Children! Now this letter would have been read out loud to the Ephesian church. And so I imagine like the whole room would have had children in the congregation, and at this moment they would have sort of perked up. They would have like looked up. Hey kids, there's something for you now to do. There's something for you now to consider. There's something, a practice, a way of life. There's something for you in your walk with Christ. Those of you who have believed, there's something for you to identify with Christ in. Now, the fact that they read this letter out loud reminds us that children were assumed to be present in the congregation. And that's a conversation every parent has to have. We have had it at our house 4 different times with all of our kids. And it's like, when is the right time to start putting our kids in the service? And I'll tell you one of the methods that we used for that later in the sermon. But that's a challenge to all of us. Our kids need to be here. Our kids need to be here. As faithful moms and dads, we need to bring our kids. We need to make sure that they're growing up in the household of the Lord. Children have worth. Children have dignity. Paul speaks to them in the sermon, in the letter. They have value, and we want to make Sunday a top priority. When the church gathers, we want to have them there. Write down Matthew 19. In Matthew 19, this was the principle that Jesus laid down. Let the little children come to me. Jesus did this often. When we took our trip to Israel, we went to Capernaum. We went to some of these cities near the Sea of Galilee, Chorazin, and they had these basalt millstones. Some of you remember those. Jesus will say things like, if you would make one of these children stumble, it'd be better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and to be cast into the sea. Massive millstones. Sometimes these millstones, if they were broken, they'd be used as anchors. They'd be used they'd be repurposed for other things. That's what he's saying there. These millstones. It'd be better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and be thrown into the sea. Don't mess with the little kids. Let them come. That's the idea. Write down Psalm 127, excuse me. It says, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. In verse 3 through 5, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. And by the way, this is an activity that you are to pursue. They're a heritage from the Lord. They're like arrows, and blessed is the man who literally fills his quiver with them. Like, be active in this. This is what I tell all of our staff all the time. Have lots and lots of babies. Amen? Lots of babies. If you're still in that age, have lots of babies. Help build the ministry. Help build the church. Children have value. God bless you. God bless you. There's a bit of a competition on staff to see who can have the most kids. We'll see who wins that one. But blessed. It's a source of great blessing. And some of you have taken that serious. God bless you. Be fruitful. Multiply. This is a good thing. Contrast that view, that conviction to the world. The world does not have a value of children. In fact, that was true in the ancient world. That was true in Paul's day. If you went back to Paul's day, the father had something called patria potestas. That's the rule or the father's authority. What that is the father had the absolute right to life or death. A father could kill his child, no problems under the law. If the child was weak, if the child was disfigured, oftentimes babies would be left out in the cold to die, and that's why the early church would collect these babies and they would adopt these babies. A lot of adoption in the early church. It was one of the things that Justin Martyr pointed to as an apologetic, as a sign that Christianity is good for society. We're adopting the children no one else wants. It was a mark of the church. Because in the ancient world, some people, underhanded, wicked people, would take those children, enslave those children, use those children, exploit those children. They'd be used as gladiators, they'd be used as prostitutes. There's just no value for children back then. Little value. Today it's very much the same. Parents practice abortion for convenience. Parents often elevate a career over having children. There's just not much value. I'm going to confess something to you. This was me at an earlier point in life. In my late 20s, I thought having kids was great. It's fine, is what people do. And it took a season of hardship where for a good season, several years, Ashley and I could not have children. And God had to correct that in my life. And we wanted to have more kids, but my wife was sick, and it was a very difficult season. And we just prayed to the Lord, Lord, would you make this happen? And it was very gut-wrenching because I was completely wrong in how I was thinking about children. God had to correct that in my life, as He does in many of our lives. Dads, you need to be convinced today on Father's Day that your children are a blessing. You need to tell them that. I tell my kids that this week, just thinking about this sermon. I'd go bedside to bedside, kid to kid. You're a blessing. Our family would not be the same if you were not here. I have done this for years where when I leave for work, I'll go to the table and we'll have our devotion before breakfast, and I'll leave and I'll put my jacket on and I'll kiss each of their heads and I'll say, you're my blessing, you're my blessing, you're my blessing. You need a diaper change, but you're still my blessing. And I'll just go person to person and I'll try to tell them that. Dads, you need to tell your kids that. Children, you're a blessing. I said this to our junior hires last week. When our junior hires were all gathered together, I think they were sitting right over here in second service, and they were headed to junior high camp. You're a blessing to this church. We are thankful for you. We want you here. And we're thankful to see the next generation of believers coming up. We want you here. We need to have that mentality. Children need to know that. Parents need to be convicted of that. Parents need to serve with that conviction. If you can serve in children's ministry, if you can serve in youth ministry, you should. That ought to be a conviction of your life to support these young families, to bring them to church. I'm going to say the word adoption. Adoption. Some of you should pray about adoption. The early church was known for adoption. One of the things that's on my heart just in leadership, one of the things I'm just churning about, and I'm trying to decide how we can do this, is I would love to see Central Church create an adoption fund for people who would like to adopt. I don't know how much we can raise in that, but I'd love to see that, because that is what God's people, that is a conviction of the people of God that children are valuable, and therefore we want to be thinking how we can reach them, how we can love them, how we can raise up the next generation of Christ followers. Amen? There's a conviction there for parents, adults. There's also a conviction here for children. Notice this conviction to children. Children are to have a conviction to obey. Now, obey, that's the command of verse 1. What does obedience mean? Well, when you have to do a word study on obedience, that's a sign of a guilty conscience. Amen? You see a high schooler or a junior higher doing a word study on obedience, that's a guilty conscience. But let's do it for just a minute. It literally means to put yourself under the words of your parents. It's to listen with the intent of obeying. That's the idea. Why? Well, because this is right. Pretty simple. It's a creation pattern. It's a norm for society. It's a calling for society. But even more so, let me say this, it's a path to joy. It's a pathway to joy. Sin kills our joy. Sin kills our joy. Here, as you obey, the happiest kids are the kids that obey. I've seen that year after year, decade after decade. Listen to G.K. Chesterton. He says this, the more I considered Christianity, the more I found that while it had established a rule and order, there's a norm, there's a rule and order that is right under the Word of God, under the Bible. There's a norm for society. Yes, it does establish rule and order, but the chief aim of that order was to give room for good things. Love this phrase, for good things to run wild. Amen? And as young people come under the authority of mom and dad, it gives order, but it also gives opportunity for good things to run wild. Parents, you need to understand that you are not helping your children by allowing them to disobey, even at the youngest ages. When they defy you, it is not cute. You need to look at your children, and you need to understand that is a viper in a diaper, and they need correction, and you need to correct, and you need to discipline. And the question is why? Here's the answer. Because they're wet cement. Your children are wet cement. And if you allow them to continue disobeying you at a young age, they're going to get older and disobey you in bigger ways. And as they get to high school, they're going to disobey teachers. And when they get out of high school, they're going to disobey police officers. And the main reason that you want them to learn obedience is that they might learn obedience to God. They are wet cement when they are young. They are wet cement. And you are doing them no favors when you allow them to continue to disobey you. You've got to discipline. You have to. Let me show you what it looks like at my house. I'm just not bragging. I've failed more than I've succeeded, but I want to just share one of the things that we've done. I've told you about this before, but at our house, around age 2, we'd start doing something called blanket time. What is blanket time? We get this little square, this little blanket. It's about 5 feet by 5 feet. We put a couple toys in it. And we start challenging our toddlers. We start challenging our 3-year-old. We want you to sit on the blanket. We want you to be quiet. And you're going to sit there for 40, 45 minutes. You're not going to make a sound. And if you can be quiet for 40, 45 minutes, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, whatever that age is, you'll get a prize at the end of it. And what are we doing actually? They think we're playing a game with them. What we're actually doing is prepping them for more joy, prepping them for obedience, prepping them for discipline so that they can come to church with us. It's one of the things we're doing. We're just prepping our children for more joy. We're prepping them for good things to run wild. That's what the Christian life is all about for parents. We're helping them. We're training them to have more joy. Now, I know that the response maybe of the teenager in the room, well, is there ever a time to disobey my parents? It says obey, but is there ever a time to disobey my parents? Notice the qualifying phrase here, in the Lord. It's in your Bible. Teenagers, you can underline this, I suppose. In the Lord. In those things that are consistent with the Lord. In those things that are consistent with the Word of God. We don't obey man if it's disobeying God. But mostly that's not the problem. Mostly it's like, Caleb, take out the trash, or it's go mow the lawn, or it's something like that that is the temptation to disobey. Most of the time, this is not a conscience issue. We need to value and we need to understand our convictions, our values. Children, you need to value obedience. Parents, you need to value children. And we have to ask God to give us those biblical convictions. That's your first point. Number 2, write this one down. Number 2, not only do we need to adopt some biblical convictions, children are valuable. Boy, they are. Obedience is valuable. Yes, it is. Number 2, you need to grasp some practical motivations. The next command is to honor that we see in verse 2. And as you honor, we're given some motivations. Notice that command. Notice with me as we step into this, the command to obey is given to children. Children obey. Did you see that? That means there's a time limit on obedience. As long as you're a child, as long as you're in your parents' household, as long as you are not an adult, you should obey. There's a time limit to that. There comes a time when a man leaves his house, when a woman leaves her father's house. There's a time limit on this to adulthood. But this second word is different than obey. The second word is honor. And for this one, there's absolutely no time limit at all. This is unconditional. It's always right. It's always the right thing to do that you honor your father and your mother. This is a forever command. In fact, it's this continuous posture of honor. It's not optional. You can obey, children. And let me point this out. There can be an obedience that comes without showing honor. Don't do that either. You have to obey and have honor, and you will always have to obey. I like the picture of the kid in the corner who's looking back with a bad attitude. It's almost like that one kid who's told to sit down, and they sit down, but they say, "I'm still standing up on the inside." You know what I mean? Some of you were that kid. Some of you are that kid. You can actually obey without showing honor, and that's a problem. How am I motivated to show honor? Well, first of all, I want to go back to our identity. This is so important. It's Ephesians 4:17. Once again, I'm putting it right back up on the screen. Who are you? It's all about your identity. If you're in Christ, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, there's a new way to live. There's a new life to operate in. No longer walking as Gentiles do. No longer walking in the way that you formerly walked. When you do that, when you understand your identity, God empowers you to obey. You see, there's a principle we need to understand of the Christian life, that becoming a Christian is identification with Jesus. Just write that phrase down, identification with Jesus. You need to identify yourself with Jesus. Write down this word. Young people, it's not too early to learn this word, justification. Justification. I've heard people describe justification as just as if I've never sinned. I don't think that's quite enough, if I'm being honest with you. I think that's good, but it's not quite enough. It's not only just as if I've never sinned, but more, it's just as if I've always obeyed. It's to look and identify with Jesus, who always obeyed his Father in every way. And he also never sinned. That's justification. As we identify with Christ, that identity, from that identity flows our actions. Are you with me this morning? Let me bring it home. When we lived in Ohio, we had almost 6 acres, and we were on a farm. And I'll never forget the day I was on the porch, and I looked out, and I saw this massive, I'd never seen a skunk that big. Massive skunk. I mean, big tail, almost completely white tail. And I had to look up on the internet, what kind of skunk is that? I've never seen a skunk that big. It was absolutely stunning to see something that in the wild, but it was probably about 50 yards away. And I stayed on the porch, and I had no desire to go check it out. And I had no desire to get it off my property and shoo it away. That just wasn't in my nature. I'm just not that kind of person. There may be some of you who would like to go have a skunk fight. The problem is nobody wins in a skunk fight. Amen? It's not in my nature to do such a thing. I will do what is in line with my nature. I will do what is in line with my identity. I'm not a rodent catcher or a pest control expert. That's not who I am. As we think about our identity with Christ, as we think about what we have done, or what Christ has done for us, who he has made us, it informs our actions. Amen? There's a second motivation. Let's get very practical. In verse 3, he shows us this motivation that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. This is a command with a promise. There's a promise here. 2 of them. And Paul is combining Deuteronomy with Exodus 20. There's a couple of different promises that are given, and he's giving this proverbial truth. When you do this, you will have a better quality of life. You will have a better quantity of life. That's what he's saying. In essence, disobedience is not safe. Now, I've been working in churches since 2001. It's about 22 years. And I've watched a lot of young people. And I've watched some young people excel. And it was so great to go back and see those young people at one of my previous churches last week. Many of them have grown-up jobs, and they've launched well, and they're working in big companies, and they're honoring their father and their mothers. It's been good. But I've got just as many examples of young people who have rebelled against mom and dad, and they have become victims. They have become institutionalized. They have lived on the streets. It has not gone well with them. This is just practical, axiomatic truth. When you honor your parents, the proverbial truth is that it tends to go well for you. It's a great word for our young people. I've seen it generation after generation. And the question is, what would it look like to do that? Let me give you 4 things, young people. On Father's Day, dads are loving this. Number one, you need to honor them with your words. Honor them with your words. Proverbs 30, verse 11 says, there's a kind of man who curses his father and does not bless his mother. Don't be that guy. Don't be that girl. You need to bless, not curse. You need to honor with your words. Let your words always be honoring. Why? Because that was Jesus' identity. Jesus honored Joseph. Jesus honored his earthly father and his heavenly father. Second, honor them with your works, with your deeds. Proverbs 10:1 says, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a grief to his mother. It's a very interesting line here. It reminds me that Jesus did all that he could to please his earthly father, but John shows us, John's gospel says he did all that the Father sent him to do. His work, his deeds. In fact, John's gospel uses this idea that he was the sent one of God, and he did all that the Father sent him to do. His works honored his Father. Be like Jesus. Third, you need to honor your father and your mother with grace. Here's a great Father's Day verse. This could be your life verse or your verse for today. Proverbs 30, verse 17. The eye that mocks a father and scorns to obey a mother will be plucked out by the ravens and a valley and eaten by vultures. Happy Father's Day. Amen? Happy Father's Day. That just warms the heart today. What's the point? Jesus never mocked Joseph, and Jesus certainly never mocked his heavenly Father. What does that mean for us? Well, I'm sure Jesus looked at Joseph, and there were moments where Joseph and Mary just didn't get it. In fact, there were moments where Joseph and Mary got it wrong. Remember that moment where Jesus is teaching on the Temple Mount? Didn't you know I was supposed to be about my Father's business? And Joseph and Mary just got it wrong. And yet Jesus shows them grace. In fact, he grades his parents on a curve. That's a great word to our young people. You need to grade on a curve. Give grace. That's one of the ways you'll show honor. Fourth, you need to honor them with care. 1 Timothy 5, verse 8, this is just part of the deal. If anyone does not provide for his relatives, those members of his own household, especially them, he has denied the faith. Worse than an unbeliever. So it's just part of the deal. When your parents get old, one of the ways that you have to love them well is make sure that they're taken care of. Young people, that's why you need to work hard. That's why you need to prepare for this day. You need to be intentional towards this day. That's one of the days that you love your parents well. You've got to prepare for this day. You've got to show them honor. Let me give you another example. Write down John chapter 19. Jesus does this for his mother, Mary. Remember, Jesus is on the cross. He looks down to John, the disciple whom he loves, and he says, woman, behold your son. And then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. What is he doing? And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own house. Mary comes to live with, he makes sure that mom is being taken care of. That's just part of the deal. And every son, every daughter, you need to think through how you will show care in order to honor your father and your mother. We've got to think through these things. This is showing us the gospel lived out in the family. This is not necessarily a sermon about being a better son or about being a better dad. This is a sermon about what the gospel looks like in the church. Lived out in the family. Last point, and we're done. We need to practice tactical provocation. Now, I'll have to explain this one a little bit, but we need to adopt some convictions. Convictions about children who need to obey. This needs to be a conviction for your lifestyle. We need to grasp practical motivations. We have to understand that when we step into this pathway of obedience and honor, it goes well for us. There is reward. We are living out our identity. And lastly, we got to understand that there needs to be some provocation. We need to understand that there is a tactical provocation that's just part of our lives. Notice in verse 4, it begins fathers. Now this is different. In verse 1, it was parents. In verse 2, it was mothers or fathers and mothers. Here it's just dads, just the fathers. It's like, dads, this is just a word for you. And what that shows us is that you are the primary party of responsibility for your children, dads. And I can say this unequivocally. Statistics cannot overstate the power of a father. They have done so many studies on the power of a father in a home. 63% of youth suicides, according to one statistic, are from fatherless homes. 90%, that's a high percentage, by the way. 90% of all runaways and homeless people, those people living on the streets, fatherless homes. 85% of childhood behavioral disorders. 80% of men who have grown up and they now have anger problems, fatherless homes. 71% of all high school dropouts, fatherless homes. All those fatherless homes. That's crazy to me. What we've discovered as a society is that the government makes a terrible father. Somebody say amen with that. Amen. The government makes a terrible father. There is no replacing of the place of a father in the home. Now, I'm going to test you this morning. I'm going to see how cultured you are. You ready? How many of you will admit to it that you grew up with the TV show called The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? Amen. Yep. A few of you are cultured. Only a few. If you don't know the show, it looks like a lot of you are unfamiliar with that show, or you don't want to admit it. This is a show about a young man. His name is Will, and he's been in the news recently. We'll ignore that. But Will grew up on the streets of West Philadelphia, and that was the place where he was born and raised, and it was on the playground that he spent most of his days. That's right. I can do the whole thing. We can go through the whole song. But the whole point of the show was that he comes into his uncle's family. This is Uncle Phil. And kind of an interesting, Uncle Phil's trying to make a man out of him, trying to grow him up, put him on the right path. And there's some challenges there because they just live in different worlds. Uncle Phil's a rich lawyer, judge, and he's trying to make a man out of him. But the story goes that Will has a father that's MIA. He's just missing in action. And there's one episode where his father comes back, and his dad's name was Lou. And Lou comes into the picture, promises to take Will on a summer road trip. Will comes in with his duffel bag ready to go, and he even has a gift for his dad. And it's the statue of a father wrapping his arms around a son. He wants that relationship with his dad, Lou, so bad, and he's ready to give it to his dad, but his dad disappoints him again. He comes into the room, and his dad says, "Hey, Will, I know we're about to leave, but I'm sorry. Some business came up, some things came up. I got to go." And Will kind of acts like it's no big deal, but you could tell he's just dying on the inside because he wanted that relationship with his dad so bad. And it's at that moment that he says, "It's okay." Lou doesn't call him Dad or Daddy-O or Pop. Calls him Lou. And you can tell that he's just broken. And Lou walks out, walking out in shame. And this is the dialogue. I just want to read this to you because it's just so powerful. Uncle Phil pipes up and says, "Will, I'm sorry." Will says, "You know what? That's okay. Actually, this works out better for me, you know. Hey, why should I be mad? Actually, this works out better." He said, "At least," he said, "goodbye this time. I just wish I hadn't wasted my money buying this stupid present." Uncle Phil says, "I'm sorry." Will. Will says, oh, you know what? You ain't got to do nothing, Uncle Phil. Ain't like I'm still 5 years old, you know? Ain't like I'm sitting up every night asking Mom, when's Daddy coming home? Who needs him? Hey, he wasn't there to teach me how to shoot my first basket, but I learned, didn't I? And I got pretty good at it. Didn't I, Uncle Phil? Yeah, you did. Got through my first date without him, right? I learned to drive. I learned how to shave. I learned how to fight without him. I had 14 great birthdays without him. And he never even sent me a card. I didn't need him then, and I don't need him now. No, you know what, Uncle Phil? I'll get through college without him. I'll get a great job without him. I'll marry me a beautiful honey. And I'll have a whole bunch of kids. And I'll be a better father than he ever was. And I sure as heck don't need him for that. Because ain't a thing he could ever teach me about loving my kids. And he starts to cry. And then he breaks down and says, how come he don't want me, man? Now that may be Hollywood, but that has happened in countless homes across America. That story right there. That may be fictional, but it's not. There's a lot of dads out there, a lot of homes needing a father. Fathers, I just want to say to you on this day, if no one has told you this, I want to look you in the eye and I want to say this to you. You matter. You matter. If no one's told you the degree to which you matter to your children. You matter to their legacy, your legacy, their future. And God has raised you up for a purpose. I mean, this is a role that is so important that God himself gives it his title, Father. Just think about that for a second. That's who God the Father is. He gives it his own title. Fathers have the opportunity to provoke to action or to anger. To action or to anger. Notice with me verse 4. Do not provoke your children to anger. What are those actions that might provoke someone to anger? The word there, maybe exasperation is the word we could think about. Write a few of these down. It could be unrealistic expectations. Oh man, what's wrong with you? You got another B? Why wasn't it an A? Right? Unrealistic expectations. Maybe it's favoritism. Remember this? Isaac loved Esau, but Rebekah loved who? Jacob. Split the home. Maybe it's being overprotective. Now that's especially true as young men tend to grow older. Men were not made to be babied. Men were made to take risks. Men were made to explore. Men were made to go out and go on a journey. Kent Hughes says it like this. I love it. Some fathers exasperate their children by being overly strict and controlling. They need to remember that rearing children is like holding a wet bar of soap. Isn't that vivid? Think about this. It's like holding a wet bar of soap. Too firm a grasp and it will shoot from your hand. Too loose a grasp and it slides away. A gentle but firm hold will keep you in control. We ought to begin our fatherhood by holding the tiny, helpless bar snugly, but as it grows, gradually, wisely loosen our grip. We got to learn to do that. We have to learn. Part of our life, part of our parenting strategy is to transfer dependence. I want my kids to stop depending on me and start depending on God. That's part of our strategy as moms and as a mom and dad in my family. We want our kids to stop depending on us and to start depending on God. I put that quote in your handout, by the way, if you need that this week. Another one's overindulgence. You are actually hurting your kids if you're letting them overindulge in things like TV or food or screens or games. There's limits that you set. In fact, many studies have come out that shows that several hours a day on screens actually leads to depression. You're actually hurting your kids. You're provoking them to anger. Another one is neglect. I love this line. You ready? Rules without relationship equals rebellion. Rules without relationship equals rebellion. If you neglect your children and you don't have a relationship with them, you're going to experience rebellion. Another one is you discipline them, but you don't encourage them. You give the discipline. We do discipline at our house. We do. We do a lot of discipline at our house. But one of the things we always do afterwards is that moment where we call restore the relationship. Martin Luther said this great line. He said, "Yes, I believe spare the rod, spoil the child, but I also believe in keeping an apple next to the rod." It's a great line. You got to restore the relationship. Another way is hypocrisy. When your children seeing you do things that you command them not to do. Do as I say, not as I do. That's going to anger kids. Another one is a failure to sacrifice. They see you find money, resources for things of your hobbies, your desires, but don't see you giving and meeting the needs of their life. That's going to make them angry. We have to understand exasperation. I love the story of a man's daughter. She was writing an article on what it means to be exasperated. And she says, "Dad, what's the difference between exasperation and anger?" The dad picks up a phone and he dials a number at random. "Hello, is Melvin there?" The guy says, "Listen, this isn't Melvin. Check your facts. You're dialing the wrong number." And he hangs up, a little frustrated. He says, "All right," he's frustrated. "Now watch this." And he redials the same number. "Hello, is Melvin there?" "Buddy, you just called me. Leave me alone. Melvin's not here. You've got the wrong number. Don't call me again." And he hangs up. And the dad looks at his daughter and says, well, he was frustrated. Now he's angry. Now this next step is going to get him exasperated. Calls it again. The guy says, "Hello." And he says, "Hi, this is Melvin. Do you have any messages for me?" I like that a lot. It's to purposefully bring them to the boiling point. Dads, don't do that. It's easy to do. Purposefully, unintentionally. Instead, we need to tactically provoke them to the Lord. How? Look at verse 4. Well, several phrases here we need to understand. First is to bring them up. This is the word for nurture. You've got to nurture them. You've got to cultivate good things in them. Bring them up. And notice this next word, discipline. You can't have instruction without discipline. Discipline comes first. Again, we're talking about wet cement, friends. The things that you're seeing in them that you need to discipline, as they get older, they will become character. They're wet cement right now. So you have to discipline them. How do you instruct them? How do you give instruction? Well, the Bible gives us a pretty good pattern of that in Deuteronomy chapter 6. What that basically means is tell them about God, tell them about Jesus, tell them about the Bible a lot. Talk about it a lot. A lot. Deuteronomy 6, as you're rising, as you're going to sleep, as you're traveling, as you're sitting around the table, in every part of life, just start talking about the Lord. Let me give you some things you could do. Dads, this is your opportunity to provoke them to action. Children can't grow up to salvation on their own. They need to be taught salvation. Just start with helping them understand the gospel, helping them understand that they're a sinner, helping them understand that they need God's grace, and God's grace has come to them in the person of Jesus Christ, that Jesus has done it all. Show them how to respond in faith. Show them, teach them what faith is. Forsaking all, I trust Him. It's trusting Christ, looking away from yourself. Use things like catechisms. Anybody know what a catechism is? It's that question and answer thing where the Westminster Catechism is a good one. The New City Catechism, that's another good one. Use catechisms. You can also have an intentional devotional time. You should also read the Proverbs. Proverbs is the child-rearing book of the Bible. We are in Proverbs 16 at my household right now. Yesterday we were talking about the tongue. And I'll just read 4 or 5 verses and we'll talk about it. It's that simple. Give them truth of God's Word. That's the parenting manual of God's Word. Teach them discipline. Teach them morals. Teach them the difference between right and wrong. Let them see you paying your taxes. Let them see you making hard decisions that are right. Show them how to be generous. Pull out an offering envelope. Show them how to fill one out. Put like 2 extra zeros at the end, too. You can slip that in there. Oh, come on, that was funny. We've got to teach them about grace. That their performance is not their identity. That Jesus Christ is your identity before the Father. That is the basis of your acceptance. Fathers, I hope you understand this morning, this Father's Day is a great day of joy. It's a day worthy of celebration. I hope you can also grasp the opportunity that you have. I remember when my son was first born, we were driving to church this morning, and I was just thinking back on the early days when Caleb was just a little guy, and now he's in youth group, and he's just growing up, taller than his mom. I don't like that. Ashley doesn't like that either. But I remember back to those early days where we would do catechism and just the joy of hearing him repeat those back. Who made you, son? God made me. Why did God make you? For His glory. And we just go through the catechism. How did you glorify God? Yes. Maybe. No, I did not. And that's basically my Tuesdays. Did you glorify God? Yes. No. Maybe. I don't know. The answer is no. And we talk about the gospel, and we talk about God's grace. How are you accepted? It's on the basis of Jesus Christ, His atoning work, His death, His burial, and His resurrection. Heads bowed, eyes closed. You and I have the awesome opportunity to provoke children to Christ. Fathers, sons, daughters, this is how you'll make your Father's Day on Father's Day. This is how you'll please God. We have to think about our convictions. What are your convictions? Are you convicted of the value of children? Are you convicted of the value of obedience? You must think through your motivations. Are you motivated by the promise we've heard this morning that it may go well with you? Are you provoked to anger or to action? Are you provoking your children to anger or to action? Heads bowed, eyes closed. And if you're here today and you do not have a father, maybe an earthly father, God has promised to be a father to the fatherless. The church has many fathers to you also. There are many here who would be a father to you. But the one you need more than any other is Jesus Christ. If you are lost and separated, and today has revealed to you that you are separate from God, today you need to repent of your sin and you need to trust in Jesus. Trust in Jesus, trust in His death, trust in His burial, and His resurrection, His perfect life lived for you. Look away from yourself and look to His deeds. And the moment you do that, God Himself will become your Father. Father, I lift up all that are here today, all that are listening to my voice, whether they're present today on campus or whether they're home. Lord, I pray that you would direct us towards next steps that would glorify you. For all the fathers, Father, may we feel the opportunity that we have to raise a legacy. May we lean into that. For all the children, may we learn to obey, and may all children learn to honor. May today be a day where those children rise up and make phone calls and show up at houses to honor. And that's regardless of what kind of father our fathers have been. May we stretch to show honor, because this is what a gospel family, this is what we look like as a gospel family, identified with Christ. God, would you give us grace to do these things? Father, we thank you that you are our Father, most of all. And it is in the precious name of your Son, Jesus Christ, that we celebrate these truths. And all God's people say it together. Amen.